Now that Cyril Ramaphosa has been sworn in for a second term as President of South Africa, what's ahead for the country and its newly formed Government of National Unity? Hello, I'm Nhlanhla Naidu and this is The Heat. In last month's elections in South Africa, the African National Congress Party lost its parliamentary majority. That led the ANC to form a power-sharing agreement with the Democratic Alliance and some other smaller parties. Meanwhile, Cyril Ramaphosa was sworn in for a second term as President of South Africa last week, and he has promised a new era for the country. We begin with this report from Pretoria.
Thousands of ordinary South Africans gathered at the Union Building lawns early in the day, braving a chilly morning to witness the inauguration. The inauguration ceremony was attended by a number of dignitaries and heads of state, mostly from African nations, including several kings and queens. Other countries from around the world were represented by their ambassadors and high commissioners.
I, Matamela Cyril Ramaphosa, swear that I will be faithful to the Republic of South Africa.
After taking an oath to serve as the president for the second term, President Cyril Ramaphosa pledged to work with everyone to find solutions to the country's challenges.
Congratulations, Mr. President. Thank you.
His political party, the African National Congress, lost its majority that it has held since the end of apartheid, forcing the party to form a government with other political parties.
As leaders, as political parties, we are called upon to work in partnership towards a growing economy, better jobs, safer communities, and a government that works for all the people of South Africa. From across the political spectrum, parties have answered this call, understanding that no party can govern alone and make laws alone. These parties have agreed to work in partnership to employ their talents for the good of the country and the progress of the people of South Africa.
Now, to discuss the implications of all of this, I'm joined from Cape Town by the former South African ambassador to the United States, Ebrahim Rasool. Ambassador, great to see you. Welcome back to the show. We have not talked since the election, and you are an astute observer of the South African political scene. What is your overall response to the outcome of the election? I mean, this was the election where the ANC, the Party of Liberation, lost its overall majority for the first time.
Thank you very much, Anand. I think that certainly the danger lights were flickering all along that the ANC may not get 50%. I think we did not necessarily expect that it would go right down to 40%. And so while contingencies may have been planned for around 45, 46%, I don't think that we had seen 40% becoming unprecedented waters for us. And so that's created the new reality that President Ramaphosa is speaking about, and that's created this opportunity, I think, for an all-in inclusive government of national unity. So we are in uncharted waters, as many have said.
Now, there are negotiations currently taking place on the makeup of a new cabinet, and that, of course, will focus on how many seats the Democratic Alliance will get in this new cabinet. There's also deputy ministerial posts that may be given to smaller parties. There's also a possibility that the cabinet might be expanded. What is your sense of where this is going?
Look, I think we've had a fairly good first phase negotiations, which were around principles, which were around getting South Africa out of the rut that it finds itself in, ensuring that there's no leadership vacuum. And I think that those principles are by and large very, very good. I think we're now in the phase of what I would call horse trading. We now have demands for this post, that post, and the other. The Democratic Alliance has put its cards on the table. It wants 10 posts. It wants it across the various cabinet clusters. It wants very influential posts. My suspicion is that what the ANC may give the Democratic Alliance is not their 10, but it could be 6 or 7. I think it will also give some of the smaller alliance partners within this government of national unity an additional 3 to 4 seats. And then, of course, there's any number of ministerial seats. And then I think finally, one would also need to look at what portfolio committees in Parliament could be holding government accountable. So that's my sense of where the horse trading is leading to. And I think that the ANC may not get away without giving some significant portfolios to particularly the Democratic Alliance.
Ambassador, you mentioned some of the challenges that South Africa will face, things like poverty, inequality. I mean, if you add to that rolling blackouts, the collapse of some of its infrastructure, including water supplies, there's persistent crime, there's immigration issues that need to be addressed. This coalition government will have its work cut out for it, but what do you see as the priorities?
I think the priorities immediately is to stabilize the country, to give confidence to the people, and I think to rebuild the economy, which is based on 2 fundamental foundations. The one would be long-term capacity for human resources, because South Africa does not only have an unemployment problem, it has an unemployability problem, because we have jobs which require skills and we have workers who don't have the requisite skills. So I think those for me would be the kind of fruits that we must immediately invest in. And therefore, the formula of a government of national unity is not one that is made for populism. It is one that is made for technocratic and disciplined work that must be done. And I certainly think that we need to be able to tackle all the problems and not make it, and maybe that's the opportunity, not have it being the problems of one single party only.
What about key issues like land redistribution and black economic empowerment, also known as BEE? This is somewhat of a controversial policy as far as some South Africans are concerned. Effectively, it's a affirmative action program which encourages more black participation in the economy. The ANC and its main partner, the Democratic Alliance, they don't see eye to eye on these policies. Are they going to be able to overcome those differences?
I think both sides would have to sacrifice some of their holy cows and be able to say, okay, where is the middle point that we can have this conversation? I'm comforted as someone who fought for liberation and been involved in the first 30 years of governance. I'm comforted by the agreement, the principled agreement made by the 2 parties. So, for example, one of the clauses in the statement of intent says that we want rapid economic growth, but it must be inclusive. It must be conscious of the need for redress coming out of our historical situation. So I think that there is a room for pragmatism, overcoming the injustices of the past, the modalities of doing that, the speed at which it's been done, and the avoidance of unintended consequences. So that gives me comfort, as well as those clauses which go to international relations, in which, for example, the agreement says it will be human rights-based, based on solidarity, South-South cooperation, and therefore not even something like BRICS, I think, is threatened by it. But it's all going to be in the art of governance that I think these things will play themselves out.
What about the domestic political challenges that this coalition will face? I mean, former President Jacob Zuma, he broke ranks, of course, with the ANC and now heads the MK party. That party secured a significant amount of the vote, something like 11.8%. They will not be a part of the government of national unity. Neither will the far-left economic freedom fighters, which will remain in opposition. Both these parties are opposed to the government of national unity. I mean, how difficult can they make it for the government to see through its program?
The ANC has effectively, by calling it a government of national unity, inviting everyone in, put the onus on those who stay out to make the case about why they stay out. And so MKP has stayed out, EFF has stayed out, and they must explain to the electorate why they're not part of it. On the other hand, 10 parties already constituting something like over 68% of those represented in parliament are in the government of national unity. So that makes it fairly unshakable. I think, secondly, the agreements in key provinces like KwaZulu-Natal, where the GNU has translated into a government of provincial unity, the same in Gauteng, I think ensures medium-term stability for those two very important provinces, which hold the two biggest budgets, the economic powerhouses, and so forth. So I really think that if we don't falter on horse trading and we stick to the agreements that we have made on the broad principles of how we will govern, and we remain technocratic and disciplined in our implementation and execution, I think we can turn the next 5 years into the years of reset, and for South Africa, the years of creating the foundation for future economic growth and social well-being for our people.
Ambassador Ebrahim Rasool, thanks so much for joining us. And for more now, we are joined from Cape Town by Sanusha Naidu. She is a Senior Research Associate with the Institute for Global Dialogue. Also joining us from Johannesburg is Nhlanhla Sehume. He is a journalist and news anchor. And with us too is Abdullahi Boru Halakhe. He is an Africa security and policy analyst. Welcome to all of you. Nhlanhla, let me start with you. Talking to Ebrahim Rasool, the former South African ambassador to the United States there, he was talking about some of the challenges that South Africa will face in the years ahead, this new national unity government. When President Ramaphosa was sworn in for a second term, he talked about this as being the beginning of a new era. Let's listen.
The formation of a government of national unity is a moment of profound significance. It is the beginning of a new era.
So, Nhlanhla, the President also laid out some priorities for the new government, creating jobs and making communities safer. What are expectations for this new coalition government?
Well, expectations are that this new coalition government, or the so-called government of national unity, will indeed start fast-tracking its intention to form a unified government, as the electorate has literally forced them to work together. Some of the big political parties in this country, of course, being that the ANC failed to achieve an outright majority during the elections. But it's almost a month since the May 29th elections, and yet we are still yet to hear of any news about the formation of a cabinet, especially at a national level. In some provinces, those elected as premiers of provinces, including KZN, have gotten on with the tasks and developed what makes up their cabinet. But when it comes to President Cyril Ramaphosa's cabinet, as things stand right now, little is very known on when he will make an announcement of a new cabinet. But still, a lot of expectations riding on this government of national unity. When speaking to the average man on the street, they'll tell you that, look, we are done with the politics. We've elected who we want to be in power, but now we want to see a government that actually works and delivers real services to the people of South Africa, but also ensures that there's a stable electricity supply, because load shedding has caused massive problems, especially for small businesses that have been forced to even close down shop because of this intermittent power supply. So South Africans are really calling for a period of movement now past these elections.
Sanusha, the ANC will now be sharing power with the Democratic Alliance, which won 22% of the vote. Here is what some of the DA leader, John Steenhuisen, had to say. Let's listen.
I believe that we will be taking into government our experience and expertise at local government, but also in the province of the Western Cape, and to put this towards assisting the growth of South Africa nationally.
So, Sanusha, looking at some of the priorities that the government faces, this new national unity government, growing the economy, creating jobs, levelling the playing field, building infrastructure, can these two parties work together?
Good day, Anand. Good day to my colleagues and, of course, to the viewers. It seems to be that they are having a lot of difficulty at the moment. They just cannot come to an agreement on what the kind of negotiations that they are engaged in will produce in terms of a power sharing arrangement and posts with regard to the cabinet. And we've seen in the last 2 days tensions between the two parties in terms of what the government of national unity seems to be kind of a fork in the road for both of them in terms of the portfolios, the cabinet clusters that make up the many portfolios. And this is where they've now seemed to have locked into a battle in terms of locking horns around the fact that we saw over the weekend a letter that has been now made public by the Democratic Alliance and, of course, Helen Zille, who actually penned the letter in response to Fikile Mbalula, who's the Secretary General of the ANC, and Helen Zille, who is the federal executive within the DA, saying that there are several more posts that they want in this negotiations. They feel that because of their broad proportionality or what they call their representation in terms of their electoral outcomes, that they should have a little bit more cabinet posts. And they're actually talking about the DA getting the DP, the deputy president position. If that's not what they're willing to forego that if they get a position or a ministerial position in the presidency that gives them full participatory power in terms of policy development, as well as in monitoring of the presidency, but also in terms of being able to have the kind of oversight in terms of leader of government business. And I think this is where we kind of now find ourselves in this kind of battleground between the two parties. And it's because of the fact that none of the parties are able to get a majority that we find that there seems to be a kind of hardball kind of approach being taken. Now, whether or not they're able to resolve these issues in the next couple of days, because we are hearing that there may be, according to the parliamentary calendar, which starts its full engagement on Thursday this week, that they have to start thinking about when this first parliamentary address takes place under the 7th administration. And there's been talk of a particular date. And then there has to be the cabinet lekgotla before that, which is a meeting of the newly appointed cabinet, and they have to set the agenda going forward. So I think right now we kind of caught in this battleground between these two parties, where both are kind of saying, well, you know what, this is not what we discussed. The ANC said 3 portfolio positions according to some media reports, but right now I think this is where we kind of find ourselves in a kind of uncharted territory where there is a president, but we have to look at the government going forward in terms of formation of a cabinet.
Abdullahi, according to some of the commentary that's been coming out of South Africa, some black South Africans have expressed discomfort with a white-led party given power in South Africa, even in a coalition. And you add to that some of the fundamental differences between the ANC and its main partner, the Democratic Alliance. I mean, how do you see this work?
I think the previous colleague captured it well. I think we are in uncharted territory. But I think the underlying, unstated comments that are coming from the DNA is that, look, we saved your political career. We need a big chunk of, substantial ministries. But I think it is also a precursor of what would be an incredibly difficult process. Even, early stages that we are seeing, even the sharing of cabinet position and other positions are proving to be very sticky. So if that is the challenge, and the electorate have spoken, none of these parties, especially for the ANC, this was a free lesson in them failing in what to do. So I think we are headed in a difficult position. I just want to make one point. There are 2 critical issues that the ANC really, or even the South African government of GNU, Government of National Unity, needs to put its head and try and resolve, or at least minimize the sharpness of it. One is the economy, the economy, the economy. I think the unemployment numbers, as well as, the state of electricity, that is critical. The second one is governance. Yeah. ANC needs to figure out how to govern and govern properly in the names of the people. And those people, the majority of them are black South Africans, and they are not comfortable with the DA dictating the terms early on.
Abdullahi, it seems that what we are hearing about right now is a lot of political differences between these two main parties. But the message from the electorate during the election was, we don't want to play politics anymore. It's time to deliver. The two parties in this coalition and the others, of course, have to get together and deliver for South Africans.
Yes, they have to. They have no option. Like where they are electorally, ANC is not as strong as it is, and they have been handed a lesson because of the way they've handled the economy, because of how poor the governance have been, because many South Africans, particularly those who are born after the ANC coming into power, find themselves the pathway. They don't have the pathway of upward socio-economic and political mobility. They have been sent a stern warning. But if ANC get caught up in this drama with DA and fail to realize that, look, DA, as important as they are because of this particular moment, is not the priority. Their target audience are the many young and old South Africans who have said to them, we feel we are not heard. So I think for Ramaphosa and the generation that saw the end of apartheid, oversaw this is a lesson, and this is their moment. If there is one legacy that they can have, is to tell South Africans, and majority of Black people around the world that rallied for South Africa, that defended South Africa, that indeed, because the undertone coming from DA is, you're not good at governing, you're not good at doing the economy, we are supposed to show you this is the opportunity to shine. But I don't think, but to my mind, they are still burying their heads in the sand.
And Nhlanhla, South Africa is a relatively young democracy. The first democratic election was held 30 years ago. Are Black South Africans now more tolerant of there being whites in government at this stage?
I would imagine that South Africa's democracy has matured quite a bit. Also given the fact that when you look at the performance of the Democratic Alliance, notably in the National Assembly, they've played a key role as an opposition party. And I'm sure South Africans, especially given that, for instance, parliamentary TV has gotten more popular now. More and more South Africans are actually watching, call it leaders or political party leaders holding each other accountable. So these are not exactly the members of parliament who might feature from the opposition benches, for instance, who might feature in Ramaphosa's cabinet, may not necessarily be unbeknown to South Africans. These are individuals who have been tried and tested as well. So when it comes to tolerance or racial tolerance, I would think that South Africa right now is a much more, not different country per se, when it comes to the social fabric and still surging levels of unemployment and widening inequality. But when it comes to a person-to-person tolerance, I would think that the average South African would be more tolerant to a party like the DA featuring in a government of national unity.
Sanusha, beyond economic issues, what are some of the other challenges that this new government of national unity will be facing? I'm thinking of things like political stability, things like security. I mean, if we look at the MK party, which won a significant part of the vote, just over or just under 12%, does some of the language used by MK leaders give you cause for concern? Of course, they are not part of the government of national unity, I should say.
Not necessarily, but they are basically part of parliament, and they are part of the broader spectrum of the South African landscape. I mean, they got 58 seats in the National Assembly, and I think they'll be sworn in this coming week into Parliament. But I think it goes beyond just the MK and the language that they use. I think it's really about things that are about linked back to the economy, about socio-economic security, education, access, safety and security, issues of crime, people feeling safe in their communities. It's about housing. It's about the various clusters. And I think that circles back to not just about what the economy is and how we need to grow to create jobs and deal with poverty and inequality, but it's the economic and the socio-economic security that links back to the kind of investment you want back into the country when it's stable. We saw a very good performance of the currency last week. Today we're seeing a bit of a weakening of that because there's an uncertainty around the GNU and the negotiations and the whole governing arrangement of cabinet and how this would go forward. But I think ordinary South Africans also realize, that they know why they didn't give anyone a majority to form a government. And so they understand that as much as we talk about the ANC, and of course the other big dilemma is the fact that the DA also feels that the ANC didn't win a majority and it won only 40% of the vote, and therefore it shouldn't have that kind of ability to say that they are inviting other parties to join a government of national unity. I think on the same token, when you look at the Western Cape, where the Democratic Alliance is the governing party in terms of the provincial government, there are very important wins, but there are also very important challenges that also come to the fore in terms of the fact that the Western Cape is an important governance architecture for the DA, but outside of the metro, they do struggle with smaller parties like the Patriotic Alliance, which has done well in terms of areas in the Beaufort West area and so forth. So there is another challenge also within the Western Cape that I think also needs to be looked at in terms of how the DA also needs to think about what is their governance architecture that they could bring to this GNU.
Abdullahi here, I've just got a little bit of time left, but do you see any risks ahead in terms of political stability in South Africa? I mean, I'm thinking of the time not so long ago, just a few years back, when the former president, Jacob Zuma, was arrested, and we saw this outbreak of violence. Could that happen again?
It could, but I think South Africa has got very robust institutional framework to really take care of that. I think if the current administration moves with with speed, and provide pressure valve by showing people that, look, we hear you, we feel you, these are our plans to be able to rescue the economy, a lot of people will give them the benefit of the doubt. But the other question is the question of South Africa's international relations, because South Africa, despite domestically not doing very well, ANC is still seen in the same revolutionary rose-tinted lenses. The DRC itself deployed on Gaza issues. So I think there is that chance as well that this has to be taken care of simultaneously.
Okay, and that is where we have to leave it. Thanks to all of you for being with us. And that is it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Nhlanhla Naidu in Washington, D.C.